The unearthing. James Carter wiped the sweat from his brow as he dug deeper into the earth, his hands trembling with a mixture of excitement and fatigue. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the rolling hills outside the sleepy town of Millbridge, where rumors of an ancient battlefield had lured him to this remote spot. For years, locals whispered about lost relics buried beneath the soil, artifact from a forgotten war that had shaped their world long before modern history recorded a thing. Archaeologists had long since abandoned the area, deeming it barren. But James was different. A history buff and amateur treasure hunter, he believed the truth often lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone persistent enough to uncover it. His shovel struck something hard. Heart pounding, he cleared the dirt away with his hands, revealing a glimmer of metal. It was a sword, long, elegant, and unlike any James had ever seen. Though tarnished with rust, the blade remained remarkably intact, almost glowing faintly in the dimming light. Along its length was an inscription carved deep into the metal. The words shimmered faintly, as if alive. "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your foes." James traced the letters with trembling fingers. The message sent a shiver down his spine. Who was the fallen warrior? And what enemies did the blade speak of? Questions raced through his mind, but one feeling was clear. This was no ordinary relic. That night, back in his small apartment cluttered with history books and maps, James examined the sword by flashlight. As he held it upright, the glow intensified. Suddenly, a vision flooded his mind. A chaotic battlefield engulfed in smoke and fire, the clash of steel ringing through the air. He saw a warrior, proud and fierce, fighting desperately against shadowy figures wielding cruel weapons. The warrior fell, his eyes burning with defiance as he muttered a curse that echoed through time. James staggered back, breathless. The sword's power was real. But was it a blessing or a curse? Determined to uncover the truth, James dove into research. He scoured old texts, ancient manuscripts, and obscure legends, piecing together fragments about a warrior named Kaelen. According to forgotten lore, Kaelen was a legendary fighter who had stood against a dark alliance threatening to enslave humanity centuries ago. The sword was said to hold a mystical bond with its bearer, a bond that transferred the warrior's legacy, strength, and enemies to whoever wielded it. The more James read, the heavier the responsibility felt. Could he be the next bearer? And if so, what dangers awaited him? His questions didn't remain unanswered for long. One evening, as rain hammered against the windows, James sensed a presence lurking outside. Shadows moved beneath the streetlights, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the door to his apartment was slammed open. Masked figures rushed inside, their intent clear. They wanted the sword. James barely had time to react. Clutching the blade, he felt an unfamiliar surge of power. His body moved with unnatural speed and precision, blocking and striking with skill he had never known. The attackers stumbled, surprised by his sudden prowess. He fought with a fierce determination, driven by something beyond himself. After a desperate struggle, the assailants fled into the stormy night, leaving James alone, panting and shaken. What is this?" he whispered to himself, staring at the sword glowing softly in his hands. He knew then that the inscription was no idle threat. Whoever had been enemies of the fallen warrior had not vanished with time. They were real, and they were coming for him. But James refused to be a victim. The sword had chosen him, and he would uncover the truth behind its power. More importantly, he would prepare to face whatever enemies lay in wait. Because now, they were his enemies too. The legacy awakens. The days after the attack blurred together for James Carter. Sleep was scarce, haunted by shadows and echoes of battles he had never fought, yet somehow felt intimately connected to. The sword rested on his desk, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat, a silent reminder of the heavy burden now resting on his shoulders. At first, James had tried to ignore it. He wanted to believe it was just a relic, a coincidence that had triggered his strange new reflexes. But the truth was impossible to deny. The power within the sword was awakening something inside him, something ancient. One morning, as James held the sword upright in the bright light of his living room, he felt a sudden jolt ripple through his arm. His vision blurred, and he stumbled back, clutching the hilt tightly. In that instant, a rush of images flooded his mind. A sprawling battlefield, the clash of warriors beneath dark storm clouds, the roar of desperate cries. But this time, the vision was clearer, sharper. He saw through the eyes of the fallen warrior, Kaelen. Kaelen's face was fierce, scarred, but resolute. He fought with unmatched skill against shadowy enemies who bore twisted weapons and wore armor black as night. The warriors were not mere soldiers. They moved with unnatural coordination, as if bound by dark will. James gasped, collapsing to his knees. The sword wasn't just a weapon. It was a conduit, a bridge connecting him to Kaelen's soul. As the visions faded, James felt a rush of knowledge seeping into his mind. Ancient combat techniques, strategies, languages long lost, and most unsettling, the awareness that all the enemies Kaelen had made in his time were magically bound to James now. The inscription on the blade was no mere warning. It was a curse and a promise. He was marked. Later that day, James's research deepened. He discovered a fragment of a long-forgotten manuscript written by an ancient historian who had chronicled Kaelen's war. The warrior had fought against a coalition of clans who worshipped a dark, corrupt force that sought to extinguish humanity's light. These enemies had sworn eternal vengeance, their hatred transcending death itself. But that was centuries ago. How could they still exist? James's answer came quickly and terrifyingly. That evening, as he sat in a quiet cafe, a woman approached him. She was tall and composed, with sharp eyes that seemed to look through him. Her voice was calm but urgent. "You have the sword," she said simply. James nodded, unsure whether to trust her. "My name is Lyra," she continued. "I'm a descendant of the order that once served Kaelen. We have guarded the truth for generations, waiting for the day the sword would return." Lyra explained that the enemies were not just legends. Many of their descendants had survived, hiding in the shadows of modern society. They had adapted, blending ancient dark arts with modern technology, waiting for the moment to reclaim the sword and finish what their ancestors had started. James felt the weight of her words. The war was not over. It was only beginning again. "Why me?" he asked. "Because the sword chooses its bearer," Lyra said. "And because you possess something rare, humanity's indomitable spirit. The sword's power alone is not enough. It needs a mind that can adapt, a heart that can endure." James looked at the sword resting on the table. It had changed him already, giving him strength, reflexes, and knowledge far beyond his experience. But it also tied him to a fate he never wanted. He was scared. Over the next few days, Lyra helped James understand his new reality. She introduced him to ancient texts, taught him to harness the sword's power without losing himself, and prepared him for the inevitable confrontations. James's physical abilities grew. His reflexes sharpened. His muscles remembered moves they had never learned. But it wasn't just strength. His mind sharpened, analyzing situations with tactical precision, drawing from memories not his own. One night, as James trained alone in a clearing outside town, the sword pulsed with a sudden energy. He swung it through the air, and for a moment, it seemed to slice through more than just space. Rifts flickered, showing glimpses of other worlds, other times. The sword was more than a weapon. It was a key. But the awakening came with a price. James began to feel the pull of Kaelen's enemies. Shadows seemed to stalk him in every crowd. Strange symbols appeared on walls. The hidden factions were mobilizing. One evening, Lyra received a message from an old contact, an encrypted warning that a powerful faction planned an attack on James within days. The moment of truth was approaching fast. James looked at the sword again, the glowing inscription burning bright in the dim light. "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your foes." He clenched his fists. He didn't know if he could win, but he would fight. For Kaelen, for himself, for humanity, because surrender was not an option. War rekindled. The moon hung low over the city as James, Carter, and Lyra moved through the twisting alleyways, their footsteps silent but hearts pounding. The night air was thick with tension, every shadow seeming to hide unseen eyes. They were closing in on one of the secret strongholds belonging to the dark factions, enemies of the fallen warrior whose hatred had survived centuries. James tightened his grip on the sword. It pulsed softly, as if sensing the danger ahead, guiding him. The training with Lyra had sharpened his instincts and skills, but nothing could fully prepare him for what awaited. Inside the stronghold, ancient symbols intertwined with high-tech surveillance devices. The enemy had adapted, melding sorcery with modern weapons, their warriors enhanced by dark rituals and cybernetic implants. They were a terrifying fusion of old and new. Lyra whispered, "This is where Kaelen's enemies now plot their return. We stop them here, or we lose everything." James nodded, heart steady despite the weight of the moment. The sword's power coursed through him, strength, agility, and a clarity of mind unlike anything he had known. As they slipped inside, the enemy's guards spotted them. The alarm echoed, metal clashing, and the battle ignited. James moved with precision and grace, every swing of the sword cutting through steel and shadow. The blade seemed alive in his hands, responding to his thoughts, slicing through dark magic-infused armor like paper. He ducked a strike from a cybernetic warrior, countering with a blow that sent sparks flying. Lyra fought alongside him, weaving spells that disrupted the enemy's defenses. Together, they were a storm, human determination fused with ancient power. Yet the enemy was relentless. For every warrior they felled, two more emerged, their faces hidden beneath ominous masks, their movements synchronized and deadly. In the chaos, James glimpsed a dark altar pulsing with malevolent energy. The faction's leader was close, using forbidden powers to channel an ancient curse meant to enslave humanity. "We have to stop that ritual," James shouted, pushing forward through the melee. Lyra nodded, covering his flank with a barrier spell. James sprinted, the sword glowing fiercely as he charged. Reaching the altar, he confronted a towering figure cloaked in shadows, the immortal warlord who had once killed Kaelen centuries ago and now sought to reclaim the sword. "You are but a pale echo of the fallen warrior," the warlord hissed. "You will perish as he did." James steadied himself, feeling the weight of history and destiny pressing down. "No," he said firmly. "I am the bearer now, and your war ends tonight." The sword blazed with light as they clashed. Steel rang against dark magic, every strike a battle between past and present. James's human ingenuity shone through. He dodged, parried, and exploited openings with tactics learned from both Kaelen's memories and his own modern experience. But the warlord was cunning and powerful. His dark energy sapped James's strength, threatening to overwhelm him. At a critical moment, James recalled Lyra's teachings, how the sword could do more than cut flesh, it could sever bonds of darkness. Summoning every ounce of will, James plunged the blade into the heart of the ritual altar. A surge of radiant energy exploded outward, shattering the curse and weakening the warlord. The enemy forces faltered, their dark enchantments unraveling. Seizing the moment, James pressed his advantage, driving the warlord back with a final, powerful strike. The immortal's form wavered, then dissipated into shadows. Silence fell. James stood, breath ragged, sword still glowing faintly in his hand. Around him, the remaining enemies fled or surrendered, their dark alliance fractured. Lyra approached, her eyes bright with relief. "You did it. The war, it's rekindled. But today, humanity has won a great victory." James nodded, though inside he felt the battle had only just begun. The sword's inscription echoed in his mind. "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your foes." There were more factions, more threats hidden in the shadows, waiting to strike. But James no longer feared the future. He was no longer just a man who found an old sword. He was the fallen warrior's heir, stronger, wiser, and ready. The legacy of Kaelen lived on through him, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. And humanity would stand, unyielding, as long as that light burned. The fallen warrior's heir. The ancient fortress lay hidden beneath the city's bustling streets, its stone walls cloaked in centuries of forgotten history. James Carter stood at its entrance, the sword's blade gleaming with quiet power in his hand. Beside him, Lyra moved with practiced grace, her eyes sharp and watchful. This was the final battleground, the place where the Dark Alliance's leader, the immortal warlord who had slain Kaelen long ago, had gathered his last forces. Tonight, James would face the enemy who had haunted his visions and threatened to plunge humanity back into darkness. As they descended into the fortress's depths, the air grew heavy with a malevolent energy. The walls seemed to whisper of ancient betrayals and bloodshed, the weight of history pressing down. Lyra turned to James. The warlord draws his strength from the sword's curse. To defeat him, you must fully awaken Kaelen's spirit within you. James swallowed hard. What does that mean? You must merge your essence with his. Sacrifice a part of yourself to awaken the warrior's true power. It's a risk. You may lose who you are. James clenched his jaw. He had come too far to turn back now. The chamber ahead erupted with dark light as the warlord appeared, his eyes blazing with hatred and immortality. You dare challenge me, bearer of a forgotten blade. I will end you as I ended your predecessor. James stepped forward, feeling the sword pulse wildly. He called on every lesson, every shred of strength, every flicker of courage. The sword's glow intensified, wrapping around him like a burning aura. As the battle began, steel met dark magic with oath-shaking force. The warlord's strikes were relentless, his power amplified by centuries of hatred. But James fought with something more, human ingenuity and the unyielding spirit of a protector. At a critical moment, the warlord unleashed a wave of shadow that threatened to engulf James. Pain seethed through him, and the world blurred. Then, a voice echoed within, Kaelen's voice. Fight not alone. Share your strength with me. James closed his eyes, willing himself to surrender a piece of his soul to the fallen warrior. The sword flared brilliantly as their essences intertwined. In that moment, James became more than a man. He became the living legacy of Kaelen. His wounds healed rapidly, his strength surged beyond limits, and his mind sharpened with centuries of battle wisdom. The tide turned. With a roar, James pressed the attack, the sword cutting through shadow and flesh alike. The warlord faltered, his immortal facade cracking. Desperation twisted his features as James delivered the final blow, shattering the dark curse that bound the enemy's power. Silence filled the chamber. The warlord's form dissolved into the void, and the Dark Alliance crumbled. James sank to his knees, breathing hard. The sword's glow softened, now calm and steady. Lyra approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did it. The curse is broken. Kaelen's spirit lives on in you. James looked down at the blade, now etched with new runes of protection and hope. He realized the inscription had changed meaning. No longer was he merely the sword's bearer. He was its master, its guardian. The burden remained, but so did the strength. Outside, dawn broke over the city. The world was safe, for now. James stood, ready to face whatever came next. Because the fallen warrior's enemies might rise again, but humanity's spirit would never be defeated. And as long as the sword was in his hand, James Carter would be their shield.